Bay Area. We are live. I forget what episode number this is. I think we're in the 90s, 93 maybe. Joined by Tasha Louie. Am I saying that right? Tasha Louie.
Yes, you are.
Straightforward. And she is, if anyone is not familiar with her on Instagram, 13,000 followers. Let's add a few more from this episode, hopefully. Go follow her. She is an explorer of movement, which I'm a big fan of. Hence, we have Christopher Walken doing his dancing and exploring his movement. Anyone hasn't seen that video in a few years, came out in the late 90s, I think. But yeah, Tasha Louie joining us from the Bay Area and is a movement explorer. I think that's a good term. How is the Bay Area, and tell us what's going on?
Bay Area is always sunny. No, most of the time. We have really good weather here most of the time. And was born and raised here. So definitely been spoiled a little bit. Anytime I go out of California, then I realize how good I have it. And I have to realize that I should stop complaining every now and then about it.
Yeah. It's San Francisco? There, I forget what author it was. It was like Hemingway or something that said the coldest summer I ever spent in San Francisco was like in an August or something. Or he said the worst winter I ever had in the world was like I forget what it was. I'll have to look it up. I feel bad I lost it, but it was something like that. It was, 'cause he was just pointing out the fact that it gets really cold in August in San Francisco.
In San Francisco, particularly, yes.
Yeah, it's kind of a backwards thing there, climate-wise. But anyway, so let's jump into the movements and the craziness of all that. So yeah, your Instagram. You were asking before we went on how I kind of discovered you, and one of my friends shared with me your account and was like, "Look at all this crazy stuff this chick's doing," and this exploration of movement and what the human body can do. So yeah, what brought you to exploring all of these Zurcher and Jefferson and these other things that were named after random people, or Swiss lifts that you make up yourself, which is fun?
I think it has a lot to do with feeling very intimidated in my college years, wanting to get fit, wanting to move. My background wasn't all that extensive. I started in tennis in high school, but that was about it. And if you don't keep up with team sports, you have to do a lot of it on your own. So went to the gym like everybody else, incredibly intimidated because it looks like everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing every single day, every minute of it. And yeah, it was a struggle to figure out what to do for myself, what worked, what didn't work. And definitely there are times when you feel like I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to hurt myself, so I'm just not going to do it. And so cycling between that for several years, I found a pattern of things that worked for me that were fun, sustainable, and finally did some research into it. It became a profession and it helped a lot of other people that felt the same way. And so it just felt natural to go into it and explore more. And there are countless varieties and variations of things to do. The basics are always fun, but there's always a little leeway, and I'd like to explore that for people that aren't into powerlifting, which is big right now. For example, like you'll get some trainers that are really good at powerlifting, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if they get a senior client, for example, it might not be the best avenue to start with.
Yeah. So take us through that. You want to talk about training with seniors. You work with a few seniors. Where do you start?
I start with movements that they're comfortable with. And I also ask them what they're interested in as well. Also, their goals. I mean, my mom, for example, she asked me, I'm very, very lucky and fortunate she asked me to help her out. And she said, look, I want to be able to continue hauling groceries from Costco and doing some gardening. I want to be able to lift things over 20 pounds. I said, okay, let's start there. So very, very, very slowly and gradually, we worked up from, a rubber coated kettlebell to a sandbag that's pretty small. We actually use rice bags because that's what she has at home. Things that are not as intimidating. And now we've got her working with a barbell, something that she would have never touched 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, when I asked her to.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that, and getting into the mindset of the client that you're working with.
Yeah, I love that. I find with a lot of folks, especially seniors, if I bring them into my garage gym or whatever gym I'm in, I can confidently get almost any male, female, whatever, to lift maybe a 53-pound kettlebell, just to deadlift it. And they look at it and they walk in and they haven't touched anything before. They're like, well, I can't lift that. And I'm like, no, you have the leg strength, you have the mobility. I'm going to make sure you get in the position, you feel the right things, and we're going to safely do that. And we're going to build up the confidence between you and I to lift that. So I love that concept of kind of progressing it, but also making sure it is something that they're comfortable with, like a rice bag. So yeah, that's always a fun challenge to figure out what we can have some fun in the session, but then what are you going to do on your own? And so that's a fun little way to explore that. So with the movement exploration, so you're not necessarily having them do Zercher carries and,
Not right
and
away, at least.
yeah. But is that a goal that you have for any client you work with?
I
Being able to
think
do
that
like a Jefferson curl or Zercher?
I think that if they have an interest for it and they've seen me do it, we'll definitely ease into it. I don't think that any movement is a necessity necessarily. For sure, be able to body weight squat and pick something up off the floor, which is a deadlift, of course. But yeah, if it's something that they're interested in, we'll go into it. If it's a Jefferson curl because they want to be able to feel every joint vertebrae in their back, get a good hamstring stretch at the same time, all that kind of stuff, then sure, we'll get into it. But I don't necessarily prescribe it, so to speak, for everyone.
Yeah. And for anyone not familiar who's listening, if you're not familiar with what a Jefferson curl is, to break it down, it's just pretty much the cue that I give, at least, and I'd love to hear if you have different cues or anything like that, is basically you're trying to go one spinal segment at a time down, and you have a little bit of weight, and you're basically doing a deadlift with stiff legs, but also really maximizing the curl through your spine. And you're trying to get all 27 spinal segments to kind of move on their own. So for anyone who's done Pilates, I find that they kind of use those cues, but not necessarily with that same position and loading. So I do find that it can be a really good way to exactly what you're talking about, of getting a good hamstring stretch, but also a decompression of the spine and getting the spine moving better. I actually just, one of my clients I just had, I'm working with him and his wife. His wife is hypermobile, so she doesn't necessarily need the Jefferson curl right now. And I just had my first real session with him. And then with him, he's very tight. So I was actually trying to get him to understand how to hinge, but then also to decompress his spinal disc. So I gave him a few very basic Jefferson curls, very lightweight. So he kind of understood what the stimulus was meant to be. But yeah, in terms of the Jefferson curl, that's one that, again, should have a place somewhere, I think, in movement patterns for almost all human beings at some point. So I kind of do think everyone should get to a point where they can do that. And one of my driving philosophies, and it sounds like it kind of is for you as well, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding, but is that human beings should have good control of every joint of their body. Is that kind of a driving force for you?
As much as possible, yes. To at least be aware of it, I think that's a
Yeah.
good place to start, because
And
you can get so nerdy with that.
mhm. But I mean, and driving through, for me, I think as a physical therapist, I've found that, yeah, like you're saying, it's hard to convince everyone of the same mindset, but it is kind of what I try to get everyone towards, of, if you want to avoid a total knee replacement, which is very common, we need to get you moving your knee through a full range of motion. And it's the lack of full range of motion and control through the full range of motion that is allowing our knees to stay healthy for a long period of time. So that's what I kind of see when I see an account like yours, where you're exploring all these different body positions, rotational, different dimension, different degrees, and degrees of freedom, and angles and things like that. And so that's what I take away from something like that connects to me, where, again, I'm not going to have not everyone doing a Zercher carry, but at the same time, I do want to get everyone to do a Zercher carry at some point. And the Zercher, for anyone listening, we're throwing out names, sorry for that, is where you're kind of holding something in the front of your body with bent elbows. And again, the benefit of that is you're working anti-gravity, and you're getting your spine stronger in a bit of a rounded position, which when you see it with heavy weight done online, some people are like, oh my God, I never want my spine to do that. But at the same time, if you've built up, as Tasha here said, you know, that's really the safest thing for your spine in the long run. But there's a big gap between what we see online sometimes and
Huge.
yeah, and ultimately how we progress that and train that, where somebody might jump in and see you doing that online and say, hey, I want to try that. And yeah, so coming back to the movement exploration again, I guess that's the question is, how for your own movement exploration and play, which I love that term, is it just whatever you kind of feel that day and whatever your body's feeling, or is there you know, are you trying to kind of, are you measuring joint health, or I'd love to understand a little bit of how your system looks.
It's a very loose system.
Yeah.
Lots of times it's after, you know, if I had a heavy squat day or a deadlift day, then I'll be warmed up for the hips. I'll be
Mm-hmm.
warmed up for the knees, and then I will check in on different things like a sissy squat
Mm-hmm.
or pansy squat, or I'll do some shin boxes with some weight,
Mm-hmm.
90 that kind of stuff. That's usually how it goes. And for me, it's to see where I'm at, if I'm regressing, if I'm progressing. I don't have any particular goals because I know I have a bigger range of motion than most people, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not necessary to push it, but it's interesting to me.
Right.
And I do measure it every now and then. I record my workouts. I record the stuff I do if I have space on my phone, and then go from there. I mean, it just keeps things interesting, and I know what I'm capable of. So if
Mm-hmm.
I end up in a situation later on unexpectedly, I'll be able to know that I might be safe if I fall in this position, or if I, you know, do something weird here, or if I want to learn something completely new, like a dance or a martial art that I'm completely unfamiliar with. I'll be like, I'll watch the movement. And I'll be like, oh, I think I can do that because my knee and my hips have been in that particular
Mm.
spot before. I can take this on with a little bit more confidence. At the end of the day, it's all about moving confidently for me, and it's something that I really want for more people to have. Um, Bringing it back to a Zercher curl or Jefferson curl, it's like at some point I will introduce it, not right away, but I think a major fear a lot of people have right now is bending, rounding their spine or flexing their
Mm-hmm.
spine. A lot of seniors do that, feel that way as well, and I try to really ease them into it so that they're less fearful of it. Because at the end of the day, what we don't use or train to a certain extent is probably where we're going to be at a disadvantage. And just it's about being prepared. That's all.
Yeah, and I think to me that what's coming up is, yeah, the if you don't use it, you lose it, almost kind of what you said. And yeah, the training, there's so many different ways our bodies can move. And there is the sports specific type training,
Hmm.
where like you're talking about, if you keep exploring different dance styles and different things that your body can do, and again getting your knees into as many different positions as possible and loading and getting stronger there, that's a great way to ultimately bulletproof our bodies. And I do find for a lot of folks, I always make the analogy of, you know, if you do blood work and the blood work shows that, hey, you have deficiencies in vitamin D and vitamin B12 or whatever it is, then what do? You get a supplement and or you change your diet to include that. Same thing with movement. We have a movement diet. So a lot of folks might be doing Peloton and that's all they're doing. And then their diet of movement does not include much rotation or even extension of their shoulder joint or whatever the thing is. So yeah, that's definitely something I see a lot of people showing up with those injuries. And so speaking of injuries, you wanted to talk about training after injury. So you're getting folks after they're finished kind of their rehab and or you're helping with some rehab stuff.
I try to stay in my lane when it comes to training because that's what I am. I'm a trainer. I'm not a physical therapist or anything else. So I do work with a fair share of people after physical
Mm-hmm.
therapy. I usually even wait a little longer after they've been released by a physical therapist because I feel like, with my own experience, I've been, in my opinion, released too early.
Mm,
And I like to jump right back into what I was doing because, well, my
right.
physical therapist said so. So, and then I re injure myself,
Mm-hmm.
um, or other complications come up. So, yeah, it's a huge mind block, I think, for a lot of people because they're deathly afraid of moving in a particular way that got them injured.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of folks, they don't even really completely know what could get them injured again. It could be something completely unrelated to what got them injured in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I had my own battle of injuries with a torn ACL in late 2019,
Mm-hmm.
and then COVID happened. So I only had about 3 months of physical therapy
Hmm.
after surgery. So that was a little tough because um, didn't know what to do, didn't know how to rehab myself, so to speak. And all I could do was just do a ton of research online, trial and error, and you know, realize that a lot of what I'm rehabbing from is from the surgery, not necessarily the injury.
Mm-hmm.
So when they reattached my ACL, it was just a matter of waiting for it to remodel and become my own ligament again,
Mm-hmm.
and then strengthening everything around it so that it can support itself. That's basically all it was. I didn't realize that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So um, yeah, it was a slow process, but it was very very helpful for me to be able to relate to other people who had their own issues or situations that were similar.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I had an ACL surgery myself in 2008, and it was right out of physical therapy school. So I definitely helped make me an expert in the process. Definitely gave me that first hand experience, so to speak. And so, yeah, I definitely understand where you're coming from with that. And it looks like, based on the videos you're posting, you did a pretty good job of rehabbing. You're doing pretty full range of motion stuff.
For the most part, yeah. And the other thing that was very, I guess, key to my decision to do this not part time, full time, going from part time to full time was just that there were a lot of things that I was told by healthcare professionals that would never happen again for me.
Mm,
I would never play sports the way that I used to. I would never walk the same way. I would never have full knee flexion. I would
mm-hmm.
never have this or that. I'd always be in some sort of pain. And it turned out to be untrue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you are going through a traumatic injury and you're trying to recover, hearing certain things will kind of become a self prophecy that will come true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you believe certain things to happen when you're in a vulnerable state, it may very well happen because it prevents you from trying new things
Yeah.
and learning new things about yourself.
For sure. For sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's one of the reasons my company is Fit Care Physio. It's, if you care about your fitness, then you can avoid the healthcare system, and the healthcare system tends to keep us down, man. It is definitely a broken system in many ways. Again, it's good for reattaching an ACL, but there's
Yes.
definitely gaps, like you're saying, between, allowing it to heal and then getting you to the activities and sports that you want to do. Were those kind of comments that you just said of you'll always have pain, or you won't be able to return to the things, was that specifically around the ACL, or was it other?
So specific around the ACL, and I also separated my shoulder twice, the
Mm,
same shoulder. So there were a lot of comments being said like you have to be careful for the rest of your life, especially when you get into your 40s and 50s. You're probably going to get some form of arthritis, and that'll get in the way of the things that you want to do. I even got you're a woman, so you heal differently than men do. So maybe you should, even take it down another notch. So there are all these things that are thrown out there that I don't think are very helpful.
mm,
Um, and I think that there are a lot of things that can be done in the healthcare system to improve it.
yeah.
I'm trying to remain an optimist. I'm a cynic by nature. Um, I really am, and I'm trying
Same,
to.
same.
You as well.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm from Brooklyn, so we're just very negative, cynical people, as I've been told, especially as I've moved away from New York. People are like, "Why are you so cynical?" Like, this is how I grew up. I'm a New Yorker.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely feel that for sure. And I just want to comment, if I may, as a physical therapist, based on what you're talking about, of having a dislocation of your shoulder joint. The best thing we can do from academic standpoint, aside from kind of the narratives that you're being told, is get stronger through the full range of motion. And if you have control and ownership of that joint and have the muscle stability and control, that is the really oversimplified version of how you're going to manage that and hopefully avoid arthritis. As again, there is the risk of that, and 99% of people probably do fall under that risk, and you probably fall under that risk too. And when I had my ACL, the research showed I have an 80% chance. Anyone who's had an ACL surgery has an 80% chance of developing arthritis in that same knee, just based on the fact that we had the surgery. But that's also the other variables around it of most people don't do the right stuff. Most people don't train through a full range of motion. Most people don't get all the muscles that need to get strong around it. So seeing an account like yours, and this is why I love doing these podcasts, is it's really nice to unpack and really decompress or I don't even know what word I'm looking for, but to really unpack the movement practice and then how that can apply to and where it comes from of this injury for your own. And a lot of the things I do as well, as much as I'm a doctor of physical therapy, I love helping people. I do strength and conditioning stuff as well, but it's selfishly like so I can have health in my own body. And then like the things I'm going to learn along the way, I want to share with people, and I'm going to explore that on my own. But at the same time, like I want to live as long as possible. I want to avoid cancers and surgeries and all these things that we're all prone to, but we're prone to them because of the narratives that we're told of never squat below 90 degrees now that you had a knee surgery, or never let your knee go over your toes, or all these terrible myths that we do get put out there. But they're I try to give the benefit of the doubt to the medical system, but at the same time want to acknowledge that the reason that these things are getting said is because most people don't know how to go further with the thing, and there's this huge gap between kind of the medical system and performance, as we might call it, or fitness. And then again, it's up to personal trainers to bridge the gap to some extent, but they don't always have the best training. So there's definitely gaps that happen there where it's like, okay, you just want a six pack, or I'm just going to try to help you lose some weight. And unfortunately, again, I have my other podcast. I don't know if you've seen that one too, is the Demand Better podcast with a personal training buddy of mine back in New York City. And we're trying to call out some of the things that we see out there in the physical therapy and the medical in the fitness spaces that unfortunately, again, lead to less than ideal consequences and or results. And one of my favorite quotes is that every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. So unfortunately, the results that we're seeing with really high obesity rates, really high chronic disease rates, it's and we're actually at one of the probably fittest points of our society, where more people than ever are going to gyms, but we're not getting the results that we want, where there's these huge gaps in the food system, in the stress that we're all undertaking. So that's where, again, I try to have this big picture view. And I'm sorry, I just went on my own little ramble there and away from your account and your philosophy, but we'll try to bring it back to that.
No, it's all good. I think a lot of what you just said is very much in line with what I believe, and a lot of what I am trying to uh, do to a lesser extent.
Yeah, and I'd be curious though, with as somebody with your account, and I see knees over toes guys follow you. How do you feel about that whole system? Put you on the
I
spot.
so you were talking about systems are designed to do exactly what
Mm-hmm.
they've been marketed or designed to do.
Yep.
And my idea about systems is that I don't think that there's any one perfect system out there. I think that every system works to a certain extent. I think it's a matter of taking what applies to an individual or their situation and going
Mm-hmm.
from there. In that case, I mean, it's kind of like the old saying of building your toolbox. I don't know who came up with that saying. It's not the best, but it's the only analogy that I have right now. But
Mm-hmm.
learning the best that you as much as you can, figuring out what works in what particular instance and circumstance, and applying the right tool, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
knees over toes. I mean, it's very catchy,
Mm-hmm.
and I agree with a lot of it. I mean, I love doing sissy squats. I love going knees over toes. It's fun. I also think it's very practical because,
Mm-hmm.
my own surgeon told me to stop squatting knees over toes, and it was funny. He showed me how to do a 90-degree squat in his office. It was painful, but but we do have to go up and down the stairs,
Hmm.
right? Our knees will definitely go over our toes at that point. People sprint, their knees are going over their toes. Like those are all very practical everyday things. Maybe
Right.
not everybody sprints, but if you're walking faster, up to a jogging speed, your knees are going to be going over your toes anyway. So
Right.
there are these really dogmatic statements out there that I feel like are not helpful. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, again, to that point is, like you said, not everyone does sprint, but we are born with a certain amount of physical capacity, and again, if you don't use it, you lose it, and that's where, as we get older, and that's one of my biggest things too, is getting older folks who feel fragile, to understand that if we can progressively get them back to sprinting, and whatever
mhm,
the version of sprinting is, but I don't expect them to be beating Usain Bolt or whatever in a 100-meter dash, but if they can have the capacity to do that, and again, like the knees over toes concept is great in terms of like, let's get everyone doing sled pulls. Nothing wrong with that.
yep,
And again, it's a good way to get people more empowered, and again, moving in the right direction. Is it a cure all? Probably not. Are there problems with their system? Probably. I've talked about that on other podcasts. But yeah, I think that at the end of the day, that's the thing for me, is as we get older, we again fail to those systems, that if we're not squatting all the way down, ass to grass, you start to have issues with your ankles, your hips, your back. And the really easy analogy here is, in the third world, or the Chinese squat, as some people call it, where you're just sitting plop down, again, as low as you can go in the third world, as we might call it. Those folks tend to not have arthritis of their hips, their knees, their ankles, their spine, because they're kind of always in those positions. And they might have a deeper hip socket, and we can go into again, like the nerdiness of all that. But we as Americans tend to not go past 90 degrees. And so what happens is we get arthritis in those joints. And, unfortunately, the easy answer is motion is lotion, and or
yep.
if you don't use it, you lose it. So if we can encourage folks to go deeper, and again, explore these aspects of their body, and not get stuck in, I only do Peloton as my one movement thing, or even I only do yoga and I do these whatever 23 moves every single time, and I'm just working to get better at these 23 moves. That might be better than Peloton alone, but now if we can put things together, or explore and play, and work on, again, hanging, or going upside down, or doing, a wall walk, or whatever the thing is. This is where systems like yours, or, and I know it's not really a system per se,
It's not a
but
system.
but still, the messaging from Tasha Louie, who has 13,000 followers on Instagram, is explore some of this stuff, and again, do what you can within reason. But I mean, that's my big takeaway from seeing an awesome account like yours, and seeing you do what you do, is this is stuff that I think we should all be playing with and doing. And again, I like to do the thing. I haven't done the pancake with the barbell on my feet, where I see that, but within reason, risk reward. I envision doing that, and seeing if I can, at least catch the thing if I happen to get there. But yeah, I love the exploration of movement. That's really the big, my big message from, or takeaway from hanging out with you here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, one more thing to touch upon is you mentioned something about being upside down, being inverted, and it doesn't even have to be completely upside down. I do find that a lot of people, after a certain time in their life, they are only used to being upright, sitting,
Hmm.
walking, standing, whatever it may be. But the moment that they bend down at a awkward angle to pick something off the floor, they get dizzy or nauseated, or they go into a sort of a sense of vertigo.
Hmm.
Um, it's 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 very interesting, and that's something that I've realized a lot more and more. And it's not even a certain age. It's just a certain lifestyle habit that people have had. I have a client who's in her 40s, and she'll talk about like when she's going down to tie her shoelace or going to get to the lowest uh, dresser for her socks. She has to take a second to catch her breath because she feels like the room is spinning
Yeah.
just by going low. Like
Hmm.
that's something that I feel like is pretty important to
Right.
explore and get better at.
Yeah, and I'll give a little credit to, I think it's Dr. Perry Nicholson, if you're familiar with him. Stop Chasing Pain.
Yeah.
He's a chiropractor that he talks a lot of interesting stuff. Not everything is the most evidence based, but again, it's an interesting exploration of some stuff. But he definitely in the movement side was a big advocate of just we're not on the floor enough. Like we should get down on the floor and move around and again be aware of our bodies. And if we're not doing that, again, it's almost it's like having a sports car and never driving it over 60 miles an hour. Like we have these amazing bodies that should be doing all these different things that again, anyone can go on your account and see like, hey, like I can't imagine ever doing that. Because again, it looks almost intimidating, but at the same time, it's like, well, our bodies are capable of doing that. It's not just Tasha Louie who can do that.
It's not just me.
It's not just you for sure. And it's yeah, it's again like gymnastics is the one thing that I wish that they would have in every school, because it literally is the point of gymnastics is to explore what our bodies can do in space,
Yep.
whether it is walking on our hands or some progression of that. And so in terms of orthopedic issues, which goes back to like our kind of underlying thing is I do think this stuff will all allow us to function better, live longer, and avoid a lot of the common things where we all get disabled as we get older. And again, it's not just aging is something I've talked about a lot, and I theorize that there's no such thing as aging. There's obviously a natural progression after we get 30 and things like that of programmed cell death and blah blah blah. Again, we can geek out on that, but ultimately it's just a lack of exactly what we're talking about of exposure to
Yes.
certain things. So again, if I just never bring my arm all the way up overhead and let alone put weight in that, you start getting diminished capacity in that shoulder. And so is it beneficial to make sure we're including some versions of these things and play again within that? That's where CrossFit has been a huge benefit. Or you got some strong opinions on CrossFit? It sounded like. Were you about to jump in there?
No, I was just thinking that CrossFit is a really great example of a lot of things actually I think that the fitness industry could learn from.
Hmm.
Community is a big one that I
Yeah.
haven't really seen on that level before, which is really cool, really
Mhm.
great. The other thing is also the blending of different disciplines. You got gymnastics, you got weightlifting, you got all sorts of things there. People walking on their hands, like
Right.
that's all really cool stuff. I think to expose people to push their boundaries a little bit because people think that when they go to the gym they have to do a certain set of exercises or they
Right.
have to only do whatever it is that they've seen other people do or
Hmm.
whatnot. Like it's cool to learn how to do a pull up. Like it's not just
Right.
for certain types of people. It's cool to be able to use your body the way that you find enjoyable. I think that's a really big thing.
Hmm.
And CrossFit is a really good blend of many things that you can explore and then hone in on it if you want. It helps for sustainability too, I think, because it's fun. You'll keep doing it. You don't have
Right.
to think about, oh, I need to work on my shoulder overhead position. I don't have to worry about doing stuff for my hips specifically. It's just if you are, I don't know, if you're into capoeira, for example. I don't know if anybody's
Hmm.
into that. You're gonna
Yeah.
be swiveling your hips all over the place, and you're gonna keep doing it because it's fun, and you
Hmm.
don't have
Hmm.
to do 90-90 drills,
Right.
for example. Or if you
Yeah.
like basketball, you're going to keep playing it. Your arms are always going to be over your head.
Yeah.
You don't have to do drills for it. So I think that's something that's lacking nowadays, where people feel pressured to look or perform a certain way before they even give themselves a chance.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
And we got a listener comment. Yeah, the CrossFit community is tight. It looks awesome from Trisha Andrew. So hey Trisha. And yeah, definitely it's I've found some really interesting things being involved in that community for a long time. And at the end of the day, again, the one of the main tenets of it that does get lost even within some of the CrossFit kind of culture is learn and play new sports. That's one of the main things. So again, if that includes like go bowling, whether maybe you like it, maybe you don't, go axe throwing, go throw some darts, go play billiards, go run backwards, go do whatever it is. And yeah, walk on your hands and things like that. So so yeah, I think we're on the same page for sure. I appreciate that. I hope that message gets across to folks. Yeah, I think we covered a lot of the basic stuff here of what we agree upon. I don't know if we need to push it and find things we disagree upon, but that's okay. As the nature of modern mainstream media and all that dictates as we should be arguing about something. But I think we'll leave it there if that works for you, and tell folks where they can find you. And obviously we have your handle. Oh my God, I hate the backwards camera. There it is. There it is. There it is.
You can find me on Instagram at Tasha, TASHA _ Louie, LOUIE. I'm revamping my website right now, which will be bendermovement.com. Bender movement, yes, because bend to possibilities, bend your body, everything. So there's that. But yeah, main source right now would be on Instagram at Tasha _ Louie.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thanks again for your time. I'm going to put the bendermovement.com. Is that it down there?
Yep,
It's on the bottom
that's
of the
it.
screen there. So yeah, hopefully folks can check that out, and we'll keep seeing the cool stuff you're putting out there, and I'll copy as much of it as I can on my account and attempt, I can definitely do my skin the cat. I should do that more often. I always forget. And we definitely need the reminders. So that's where that's fun. Yeah, no, and appreciate everything you do. And we will sign off. Hope you guys got 1% better. And if you did, please like, share, subscribe, leave a rating, review, 5 stars, all that stuff. Go follow Tasha, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Thanks.